Hi, and welcome to our program. Today we are doing a tour around the Viking Aarhus, but first, let's start with the Viking Museum. Let's go.
And of course, not only have we learned a lot about, the strategic value of the city by looking underneath here and what their trade was like and who these but more important, we learned sort of who these Vikings were, because we found a lot of everyday objects that you see inside of here. And again, the red square shows that they've been found exactly at this place, but sometimes the museum, of course, adds things from other places to give a full picture of who they were. There is a saying I've heard from some of the archaeologists that if you find pottery and it's ugly, it's Danish from this point of time. And if it's pretty, it's something they bought from somewhere else.
Okay.
So for some reason, it's kind of funny. For some reason, they usually...
they were not very good with it, maybe.
I don't know if they were not... I think they were pretty good. There are some examples of it being pretty good, but I just think it's more like function over form in some sort of way, because it might easily break down. And if you like something beautiful, you might as well get it from a trader from somewhere that makes incredibly beautiful pottery.
Okay, and these are like broken, how do you call it? Like to brush your hair?
Exactly. They were, it's sometimes when we imagine people of the past, we might see them as like brutes, like filthy barbarians who are dirty everywhere, and so. But that's not true in many ways. They did want to, like, of course, look pretty and take care of themselves like we want to do today. So they had a lot of tools to do it. What do you think they did in their spare time? If they had spare time?
Like adults or?
Yeah, everyone. I'm thinking like, sometimes when we're bored, if we have like 3 minutes, we take out this and we just like keep scrolling to like occupy the time. And they didn't have phones back then, of course, but they did something else. What they did is they would probably spend a lot of time using these tenvægte, which are distei weights.
Okay, what does this do?
You have, what's it called in English? You have fibers for clothes, and then you take this like top, and then you spin it, which would spin the fiber into, it's not the correct word, I know, but rope, which would then you would be able to like sew and loom with other pieces of fiber and rope to create clothes.
So they were sewing in their free time.
Yes.
I mean, is that actually free time?
It depends who you ask. It's like, okay, is active work or is passive work like this also work? It's kind of, because you can sit and do this and still, relax and have fun and talk to people. And so.
Were they like gathering or something? Like having like social events? Like, do you know anything about like playing music?
Yes, of course. They would engage in these cultural aspects like we would, of course, play music and engage socially and have festivities. But the reason I point this out is because today we don't really appreciate how hard it is to make clothes or how long it actually takes. How long do you think it takes to make a t-shirt at this point of time?
A couple of hours, maybe minutes.
A couple of hours? I mean, today it's probably around like, let's say from it's harvested and taken to the factory and created and put into maybe a train or something for transportation, let's say 6 hours.
6 hours?
Yeah, it's just a rough estimate. How long do you think it took in the Viking Age?
Maybe weeks.
Weeks, yeah. Probably months. 2,400 hours, I've been told, it took to create one piece of clothing.
Okay.
That's a lot of time. That's why people would go around and do this, because then all the time because you would shorten the work process.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Which is also why you can understand in the past, and not that long ago, before like the Industrial Revolution and so on, that parents would get really mad if you broke your clothes or got them dirty, because they've spent a heck of a lot of time to create it.
Yeah. Do you happen to know if this was like more of an activity, like female activity, or were like both males and females doing clothes? Like, did they separate this type of
That's a good question. I must be honest, I don't know. I haven't been told. I would imagine you would at least have all kids, both boys and girls in some sort of way, and women do this, but I could also imagine that men actually might
might help out.
might help doing this because
Yeah.
it's easy.
So,
It's easy
yeah.
to do, and it's just like you can do it when you walk around the city, or when you have to go to a friend or something like that,
Yeah.
and then put it
So
away.
they would just carry the whole thing around
Yeah,
all
like
the time.
these, like we carry around our phones. And
Well, at least
underneath,
they were doing something useful.
underneath here on the floor, you can see some yellow lines and
Yeah.
circles. That's foundations of houses that have been found underneath here. And
okay.
that helped us a lot in actually figuring out how big Viking houses were, because we have the big pillars and we have the walls, which has helped us like recreate this model over here, which I think is based on some of these foundations we found here.
Okay. What are the small dots?
Tiny pillars, support pillars for the big main ones inside of the walls. And so
Okay.
these objects have also been found inside of a house, which makes sense that it's everyday household appliances. But they've also been found something new and very interesting. Oh, sorry, not new, something weird, I mean, and interesting underneath some of these houses, or well, one house in particular. And you
So
can
this
see-
was literally inside the house?
Yes, because you can see the yellow lines
Yeah.
and the walls and where the beams for support would have been. And there's a skeleton underneath. And I told you before that burying the dead inside of the city is very bad because that might contaminate drinking water. And so this would have been a very major crime. Of course,
This person was murdered?
highly likely, because they're missing their head.
Dun, dun, dun. Okay. Yeah, that makes...
Yeah, he's missing his head. He was probably, he's around 175 tall. I think we have
Okay.
estimated him to be around 30, if I don't misremember. And he's probably been murdered since he wasn't buried away from the city, but underneath a house. So this is probably Aarhus's first murder mystery.
That's
we
quite
have.
cool.
Yeah, it's quite cool. And also something interesting happened. Not far from here, there was an old Viking, what's it called in English? It's not a pond, it's where you draw water, a well.
Yeah.
Yeah, an old well where they found a head, a skeleton head inside of it. And they were like, yes, we've cleared the mystery.
Yeah.
It's his head.
Yeah.
He was murdered and his head was thrown in the well.
That's also weird, but yeah.
But the problem is that skeleton head still has its lower jaw. And he still has his lower jaw.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, and also it was a woman.
Okay.
They found out. So we have two murders that are mysteries. And
Okay.
it's very interesting because back in Viking times in Denmark, human lives weren't sanctioned. They weren't anything special. You could kill people and get away with it if you
Really?
wanted to. Yes, it's something called manibul, which will probably translate something to what would be a good translation? Man toll. It's like it's a payment you have to make.
Okay.
So let's say I murdered one from your family. There would, of course, be a ruckus, and then there would be set a verdict on how I would repay you for this. But it would usually be in money or in valuables in some sort of way. And if I could pay that amount of valuables or money to you, then it would be fine. I had murdered him. People's lives have a price that you can pay and get away with murder.
Okay.
Yes, it's
That's
very
some
brutal.
new information.
It's very brutal, but that's how society was, and it also shows a lot about how they thought about human lives and what their
Okay.
worth were. That if you can kill people and pay for it, it's okay.
Okay.
But oh, sorry, what?
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand, and I know that probably you don't know. It's hard to understand, but were the families also okay with this? Like, were people like? Was this a general thing that people were just like, yeah, okay, he was killed, but I have some money now, and that kind of makes up for the lost life? Like,
It's very hard for us modern humans to put ourselves back in the past and understand their values about human life and culture. I would still probably imagine that people would be extremely sad losing a loved one. But it was the law, it was the way that it was, that if you could pay, then it was okay to commit murder.
yeah,
However, if I killed one of your family, and I didn't have the money or the means to pay this toll, you would be guaranteed to repay the debt and more.
So you would kill someone from
You
your
might
family?
kill me and someone else from my family.
Okay.
That is a right you have if I can't pay it. It's
Okay,
a very
that's
brutal,
a real, yeah, that's
very brutal
really
society.
weird system.
It's
Okay.
probably not likely that people killed each other all the time, because you need to have people for society to
Yeah.
work, and they have jobs and functions and so on and so forth. But it might have happened a few times.
Okay.
However, there are a few loopholes. Let's say you were very rich,
Yeah.
or maybe the chieftain or the leader, and I killed maybe your son. Let's just take that as an example. Because of your standing in society and your position and your value and potentially your son's value, I wouldn't be allowed to pay you for the murder. That's too important. I would be thrown in jail instead, and they didn't have jails. But I might end up like that man over there
Okay.
and be used for ritual purposes instead.
Okay, define use for ritual purposes.
So there are, of course, even though Christianity is slowly gaining ground here in Denmark, there are still a lot of people who, of course, hold on to, or maybe at the same time also believe in the old Nordic gods and of course the traditions that follows with that. And some of them can be pretty brutal. One of my colleagues, she told me about how they might have had a ritual where they would sacrifice 9 of every male gender. So 9 men, but also 9 animals, 9 male plants, and so on.
Okay.
Which is kind of weird for us.
Yeah.
And there, he might be favorable to use a prisoner instead of going out and picking someone you might like.
So how did that work? How were people chosen?
We don't know.
Okay. Yeah.
I would probably think you would use slaves, which are called tralle.
Yeah.
Since they are, of course, in this point of time, a lower social class in regular people. Or hopefully they've had a lot of prisoners, or maybe captives from, like if they went out raiding, they would use instead of having to use people they actually cared for.
But okay. But sometimes there's also this, or I've read, maybe it doesn't really apply to the Vikings, that if like the sacrifice has to be good, like it actually has to be a sacrifice, and to sacrifice a prisoner is not really a good one, right? Like, did they make the distinction?
It's very interesting. This might be a bit of a sidetrack compared to the Vikings, but it's an interesting thing to explore nonetheless. If we go back a bit before the Viking Age to around the year of maybe like 200 to 600, the migration period here in Europe. Of course, there were still people up in Scandinavia, and we found some very interesting sacrifices in, or what are they called in English? Bogs, moser.
Bogs, yeah.
Yeah, bogs.
Like the Solomon man?
Yeah, exactly. But also material wealth is also a big factor, and it's like, have you ever tried going to a wishing well and throwing like money in it?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and then did your wish happen?
I don't think so.
No.
I think I was also a child and I was asking for a bit ridiculous things.
Yeah, sure, but it's fine. It's what you want and you wish for. You hope some kind of god or entity would listen. But the problem might be that you didn't throw in enough.
Okay.
Like in Denmark, we usually throw 20 Danish kroner, which is about, I think, $3.7 today, which is not that much money in the big perspective. But let's say instead of throwing like 20 Danish kroner in, I instead took an entire Ferrari and put inside of it.
Yeah.
That's a big, big sacrifice from my part. That's a lot of wealth.
Yeah.
And that would be almost sort of disgraceful for the gods not to listen to this. And so, of course, quality is probably, we don't know, we can talk with these people, yeah, but it seems like they preferred, of course, like beautiful, important objects to sacrifice to the bogs. But quantity has a quality of its own as well.
Okay.
So if you sacrifice enough, even though it's not the most biggest quality.
Okay, so maybe they would do quality in objects, but quantity in people to like compensate.
Sometimes that's very hard to answer.
Okay, And another thing that you mentioned that they had this ritual with like only males. Like, is there a reason for it? Like, were males like worth more, kind of? Were females not worth sacrificing, or was it another reason because they needed females for something else and men were dispensable? Like, was there?
That's a good question. I will also be honest here and say I don't know the details. It was one year I was with my colleague and she told me about this, and I found it very interesting that they might do these sort of things, like as you can see here. This might also just be an execution of someone who might not be able to pay the toll, but it might also have ritualistic purposes.
Okay, and do you know something about like how the genders were divided then? Like, was there like a but this is related to what I was asking before.
Yeah, sure.
Like, I don't know if you know a little bit about it or not. It's okay if you don't.
Highly likely that compared to like medieval times, that women were much more equal to men.
Okay.
And then like later and all the way up to like the industrial evolution, you have vulva, which are a rough translation would be witches, which have like a ritualistic spiritual connection and were very highly regarded in the Viking age.
Okay.
And
so witches in the Vikings were like, wow, and not like burn them.
Yeah, no, don't burn them.
Don't burn them. They wanted
have
them.
a connection to the spiritual world much
that's
stronger
quite
than
cool.
other.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and also a lot of women were probably also Viking fighters. There was a very interesting, what's it called, analysis. Let's just call it that in England. This was for the Iron Age, which is a bit before the Viking Age. But this woman at Camden University, she decided to take a look at all warrior graves in England. They found.
Okay, how many were there?
That's a lot. That's a lot.
Okay.
But the result is very interesting because she found out that what was before just implicitly thought to be only men, actually were 10 to 20% of these skeletons were women, which before were seen as warriors. So they probably also were warriors while also being a woman. So
there was not this thing like only men fight.
No.
Yeah.
She still thinks that probably women weren't frontline soldiers, since there still is a biological advantage to men in raw strength, but they could still serve many other functions. They could be artillery, like bowmen, bowwomen in this context, or right on top of horses and being shock cavalry, or being officers, delivering orders and so on. And which is also probably very likely for the Vikings, that women also were fighters and warriors. Okay. So not as much as a divide between the genders as later, but there still was. Men still held like the final say in many things and so on. And even though women did have some rights, it's quite interesting. Women had the right to what's it called when you're no longer married. Divorce. Yeah, on certain conditions. Like if your man hit you 3 times, you were allowed to divorce him. Or,
that is quite cool.
Yes, or if he didn't lay
Very
with
offensive.
you for 3 years, you were also allowed to divorce him. And also if he went bankrupt, you were allowed to divorce him. The problem is, it might be easy. Let's say you are the chieftain's daughter and you've married to some nobody and he goes broke. You have your right to divorce him. That's easy because your dad is the chieftain. He can enforce it. But if it's the other way, you're a poor woman who has married a chieftain's son. Yeah, good luck. Good luck getting your dad to stand up to the chieftain and say that you are allowed a divorce. Yeah. So women did have rights, but they're still enforced by men. Okay. But still more rights than in the Middle Ages. Okay. Still more freedom.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. I was going to ask something else, but I forgot.
It's okay. We can just move on.
Yeah, no, this is very interesting because I didn't know. I kind of assumed, very wrongly apparently, that there was always this kind of division in the past.
There's, if you find this very interesting, just personally, or maybe for another program if you'd like, there's a tour at the main museum, which is called Women, which explores women's role in society and their power shifting from all the way back from the Stone Ages, where we probably were the most equal ever, until the Middle Ages, where women were probably at the lowest point in like gender equality, where they're most under the heel and boots of men. But at the same time, here in Denmark, our most powerful monarch ever probably was Margrethe I, which is a woman. She created the Kalmar Union, which was the third strongest country on the planet at the time she created it. So it's a quite funny difference.
That was what I was gonna ask. What about like leadership roles? Was it kind of like how do you say it? Like imagine if my dad was a chief and he doesn't have any sons.
Yes.
Will I be the chief? Like. Okay, yeah. There's no records of that, right?
Yeah,
so.
that's very. I don't. It's very unlikely.
Yeah.
You would probably have a lot of respect still.
Okay.
And probably people would listen to what you said.
But not like in the highest position.
No. I think that would be very unlikely. Even though I do recall in the back of my mind, of course, sometimes being stories about.
Yeah, but it was more like kind of exceptions
than the rule. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, yeah, that was what I wanted to say.
And so, in continuing on this with religion and so on, even though people were turning Christians, we can still see that they also decorated many of their objects with like Old Norse mythos, like this blæsebæl called in Danish, which I have no idea, I gotta be honest, what's it called in English? It protects you from fire.
Like an amulet?
No, it's not like an amulet. It's like you put it in front of a fire, so the fire don't.
So it physically. Okay,
yeah, it just
so
blocks
it's
off. It's nothing special in that sort of way. It has a very specific purpose, but they've decided to decorate it with this very interesting motive.
Yeah. Was it this color when you found it, or did you color it?
This is a copy.
Okay.
The original is at another museum, so they might have filled it with color. I actually haven't seen the original one, so I don't know for sure.
Okay.
I would think that it still has its original colors.
Okay.
So, do you know who that is?
No idea.
No, it's
no, not
usually
even
people
a clue.
don't. Do you know anything about the Norse gods?
Yeah, but not so
Have you seen
much.
Marvel?
Yeah, but not in the last 5 years.
No,
maybe?
it's fine. Do you know who Loki is?
Yes.
Yes. That is
Loki?
That's Loki. And the way you can see it is because his mouth is soon shut.
Okay, yes.
Do you know the story?
Yeah, I don't remember exactly, but there was a time that I was watching like a lot of videos on Norse mythology because I think it's so interesting.
Yes, it's very interesting.
And I remember that there was something with his mouth. Was it because he was too manipulative or something like this?
No, to cut a very long story short, Loki entered a contest with two dwarves named Brock and Sindri on who could create the most beautiful, best magical artifacts for the Nordic gods. And Loki was so certain that he would win that he bet his head, like to Brock and Sindri, if I lose, you may take my head. And they were like, sure, it's on. And then they did their thing with smithing these magical artifacts, and Brock and Sindri ended up winning because they created Mjolnir, Thor's hammer, which is the ultimate, what's they called in English?
Ultimate weapon?
Yeah, Jetta. I think they're called giants in English, if I can't remember. The Nordic gods' main enemy they fight in Ragnarok. It's the ultimate weapon at killing them, and which why Brock and Sindri won. And so they came up to Loki and was like, we want our prize. And like, about to cut his head off, but then he said, the neck is still mine. And you can't cut off a head without cutting off the neck. And so he had made a loophole in the deal there. Yeah. And so because they got so sick and tired of whatever Loki always did and his lies and so on, Brock took magical...
needle?
Yeah, a magical needle and sew his mouth shut so he wouldn't lie anymore. Yeah. And which is very interesting because it's a story we still know today, but it's obviously also something that they knew back then and probably told to their children and so on. And so even though they're becoming Christian, the Nordic mythology still lives very strongly. So
isn't that like conflict?
I would say in the start, because of course the Vikings had a lot of gods, like the entire Nordic pantheon. So what is a god more? Why can't I also believe in Jesus Christ and Jehovah, or whatever you want to call him, God, while also believing in the other gods? And only as Christianity gained more and more strength, and slowly could like make it socially unacceptable to believe in the other gods, that this would probably be shunned upon. But that would take a lot of time. It's like, again, religion doesn't like convert people like that. It's a long process.
Yeah.
So what we have here is a gruppehus, which is called a pit house in English. That's because, as you can see, it's sunk. It's been built about a meter beneath the rest.
Okay. So this was already like this?
Yes, it's not because it's sunk down or anything.
Okay.
It's on purpose because it's insulating. It keeps heats in the winter, and it heats out when it's summer. So it's always a nice temperate climate inside of there, which is very nice because, as you can see, this woman is making clothes. She's spinning thread. It's called thread. I remember what. It's not rope, it's thread. She's spinning thread. But it's probably not something she's doing out of the sheer goodwill of her heart. Yeah. I always, and this is up to interpretation, I think she's a slave, a tral, who's been ordered to like create this by her master instead. And then it's very nice that you have a temperate climate inside when you might probably spend a lot of hours of your day inside there doing this kind of work.
Also, if your fingers are freezing, like how?
Yeah, how would you do it and manage it?
Yeah, not effective.
There's a little funny thing with this house. You can see down here to the left there's a light, which would kind of sort of imply that there's a fire, but there's no windows, and also there's no hole for the fire, for the smoke to escape. So
just looks dangerous.
Yes, she would probably die from like what's it called, poisonous air, but that's not how it was. There would always be a hole here at the top of the roof or in the middle, so it could escape. And that's probably only because those who built this model probably forgot about it. It's just a fun little fact. And these are the houses that most poor people and slaves would live in. These are these pit houses. The more rich people would live in houses like this one over here.
So that was it for today. Thank you so much for staying with us. See you next time.
Ungdomsradio. 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 Ungdomsradio.